Hello there and welcome. So today it's October, into autumn now. I just thought I'd mention a few things that might become important to new riders if they're not experienced in riding in different seasons. May have only just got the CVT in the summer and not used to bikes. So let's just have a look at a few things that might be of concern. Just going to come into this a bit slowly, looking through under the lorry there, gap in the wheels between the road and the chassis. So you could say today is almost a perfect motorcycling day. It's 10.5 degrees, so it's not too hot, it's not too cold. There's a very gentle breeze, it's dry, the sun is shining. What more could you want? It's lovely. But as the seasons change and we go into autumn, certain factors can cause us problems if we don't consider them. So today, we've said the sun's lovely, but of course the sun starts getting lower in the sky. I mean, it's just gone 10 o'clock now. If I was travelling to work early in the morning and that sun had just come up, it would be very, very low. Now, low sun is dangerous because we can't always see. We lose definition, the contrasts of things are not so good, so our vision isn't very clear. The problem is, when the sun's behind us, although we can see nicely everything ahead, oncoming vehicles don't see us because we're lost very often in the midst of the glare and the lack of contrast that the sun will provide. So that's something to be very aware of. And you'll also notice as we ride along here today, as that sun is a bit lower in the sky, we're going to get longer shadows. So we've got quite a lot of periods of darkness interspersed with very bright light, and the direct sunlight is now shining sort of down through my visor into my eyes. So that combination can make vision a problem. That's why a clean visor is important. I've got a drop down dark visor at the moment, and that's quite useful for me, but on occasions I would need to flip that up because although the bright sunlight's not very good, having a dark visor down in a shaded area is not very helpful either. So temperatures will be dropping, and of course if you've decided that you're going to use your motorcycle to go to work and you'll be riding in all hours, you may not be used to the fact that you're going to get some pretty cold mornings, and they're going to be damp mornings as well. Even on a nice sunny day, you'll probably find the change in contrast is going to leave some moisture on the ground, and you need to just bear that in mind for your tyre grip. And of course, as we've said before in all our videos, smoothness is key, no matter what the conditions, but it becomes more important when there's not very much grip on the road or the grip's compromised. And wearing the correct kit's important. You know, if you're travelling off to work 6:30, 7 in the morning, you'll probably find it's fairly cool. I don't know what it was this morning at 6:30, but if it's only 10 or 11 now, I shouldn't wonder if it wasn't nearer 4 or 5, you know. And you don't want to get yourself freezing cold on the way to work and start losing your concentration. That temperature will obviously come up to something more comfortable during the day with the sun out, but then as the evening comes and the days get shorter, sun starts to drop, so temperatures will start to drop. So you'll be coming home as well in temperatures that aren't very good. So just make sure that the kit that you've got is comfortable for you. You're not going to be cold and uncomfortable and shivering, because you will find that the wind chill factor will drop that temperature down even more. And if you encounter rain, yet again that will have an effect on you. Another thing worth considering, and it's not just restricted to winter and autumn, but it may be more prevalent. This is the first time I've ridden my bike in 2 weeks, having had to deal with COVID. And you shouldn't be riding if you don't feel good, if you don't feel with it. You know, if you're feeling rough, don't ride your bike. Now I feel okay today, I feel good today. That's hence why I've come out for the first time on the bike. I won't ride if I don't feel well. It's not safe to do so. The other problem is, of course, you do get rusty. You might say, you've only had a couple of weeks off. I'm very conscious that I might not be quite as sharp as I am when I ride every single day. So it's just a little bit of awareness, just to build into things that, you know, I've been sleeping a lot, I haven't been out on the roads for a couple of weeks, and now I am. I've got to switch back on, I've got to get back in that zone. And it's always helpful if you're aware of the fact that you might not be as sharp as you would be if you were riding every single day without having a break. And, you know, viruses such as COVID can make you very, very tired. They can fatigue you, and that does have an effect on your concentration levels, may have a effect on how quickly you see things or how quickly you react to things. So yet again, just good awareness, and if in doubt, don't go out. So one of the other things we've got to consider is the thing called microclimates. Now, microclimates, you may have heard that, you may have not. When we look at the road back there in the sunshine, it's lovely, it's all nice and dry, but we've come into a heavily shaded area here and it's still quite damp, and of course that can be more prolific if the weather had been a lot wetter. There was only a little bit of moisture about last night. But it's also quite an issue when we start getting the much lower temperatures and we start getting frost and ice on the road. And that's well worth bearing in mind, because you'll be out on the main road, temperature will be coming up, sun's on it, and then you come onto a road like this and it's still way below the temperature and there's still sort of ice and frost left on the road. You'll also find that on areas such as bridges, maybe, where the road surface is really quite thin, and it can sometimes cool a lot quicker or be more exposed to wind and the weather conditions generally. But shaded areas certainly need to be careful with those. Quite a little bit of debris on the road there from the trees, and that's something else we need to be careful of. I mean, today the leaves through here are pretty green still. We don't seem to be massively affected by the season as yet. Some areas I have seen the leaves start to change colour, and of course they start to fall off the trees. And leaves are not very helpful to the road surface for a motorcycle, especially when they're wet or they're mixed with mud from rural areas. So we do need to be quite careful, and I'm sure at some point in the near future we will get quite a lot of leaf drop. It's interesting there that with the sun coming through the trees and the amount of shade, very difficult to see clearly. That's why my speeds are quite low today as well, apart from the fact the type of roads I'm on. But I need time for my eyes to react, and I need time for my brain to be able to register things. It's like through here, it's a constant change of light intensity. You start going too fast and you misread the road, this is where it starts to go wrong for you. Better 5 minutes late than dead on time, as we always used to say. So having said, I probably have the sun visor down in the car now. A little trick you can do is you can put some insulation tape, dark tape, right at the top of the visor that doesn't interfere with your vision. And then when you drop your visor down, that acts as a sun visor like you get in your car, and that can be quite helpful. It depends how much you tip your head as well. It's not quite as adjustable as a car visor, but it can have that advantage of just hiding that little bit of sun there, which helps quite a lot. So as we can see there by the amount of debris of the trees in the verges, that's not helpful to your grip. And if you're passing a vehicle that's coming towards you on these rural roads, be mindful that if you do have to move over quite a lot to the left hand side, those areas can be quite slippery, especially if they're wet. So this road here is very typically rural. It's a single track road, and you'll see that in the centre there's quite a lot of debris accumulates, including some mossy areas. It's very well shaded, and so in the lower temperatures this type of road is going to be a problem to you, but it's microclimates. A lot of gravel as well. I mean, that's not particularly seasonal related, it just tends to be gravelly anyway, this road. Of course it is going to affect your traction, you don't want to get caught on that unless you can avoid it. But if you are on it, keep everything smooth and gentle. And there's still plenty of leaves to come down on this road. I've probably mentioned this road before in one of my videos. I was doing a training course one day on this road, and it was in the autumn. The leaves had come down quite substantially more than they have done at the moment. And when we get further up the road, you'll see there's a stop junction, and I'll talk to you about it in a little bit more detail. Notice the mossy areas there. They can be quite slippery under tyre if you're not careful, especially when they're holding moisture. And actually, you know, through the shaded area in places, the road still appears to be a little bit damp. It's not wet by any stretch of the imagination, I'm not concerned about it, but it is holding a little bit of moisture. So when we get to this junction that I just mentioned, you'll notice that the leaves are starting to fall. And it's a stop junction, and the major road ahead is a 50 limit, used to be national years ago. And so what we'll need to consider in these situations, and this is why your forward vision is so important. We can see the stop junction already, that car's braking, turning right. Got an advance warning, and we can see the stop junction. We can see it shaded. I'm going to go into this slowly. So I remember I said to my students, get your speed off early for this one. We've got a lot of trees, we've got a lot of leaf fall. And when we got here, the road was completely covered in wet leaves. So what you do is you get your speed off early, and you can see they're just starting to fall there. It's nothing significant today, but it will get worse. And so you want to be doing all your braking early, so you can just gently stop on that rear brake only. Because what you don't want to be in a situation of doing is coming along here, braking late, braking hard, losing control of your bike, or being afraid to brake properly because you've now realised what the road surface is like, and the next thing you're out there onto the main carriageway. Because that would be absolutely disastrous. So you can see, perfect example why good forward vision and planning are so important. So another factor that well worth considering on rural roads, especially in the autumn, is agricultural traffic. Large tractors pulling trailers that are very wide. And on some of these narrow roads you don't want to get caught out, so it's always worth bearing in mind. So most of my early motorcycling years were spent on a lot of these rural roads, and you do get used to some of the hazards that are prevalent. And we used to ride all year round back then. When we were younger, it wasn't unusual for somebody to come off their bike. We didn't have the level of training that people do now, so we ended up having to learn the hard way. But I always enjoyed travelling on these rural roads. And of course I travelled on other roads as well, I had to go to work. But when we got the chance, we could always come out, we'd always travel on this type of road. They're just more interesting, really. You get used to the fact that as the seasons change or the weather deteriorates, you very often get caught out with mud and leaves, gravel, road damage, potholes, damaged verges. And so you do have to consider it a lot when you're riding. It's interesting here, you know, this road is lovely and dry, but just in that area there to the near side you can see that where the bank has shaded it, it's still got a bit of moisture on it. Still won't be as much grip on that part as there will on this part. And a lot of these banks, you know, a little bit of mud washes down, mixes up, stays moist. Bit gravelly. It's all stuff to consider. I remember years ago when I had one of my 600s just going around the left hand bend on a rural road like this, and just felt the back step out. Didn't have traction control or anything in those days, put a little bit of gentle gas on, back step straight out. Fortunately it wasn't disastrous, but it's just things you have to be aware of, that the road surface does have a very major impact, of course. You know, we've discussed it before. And so at the moment we've still got quite a lot of leaves, as we said earlier, so we don't get a lot of views through the trees, through the hedges. We don't see that road ahead very easily. But of course, as the leaf fall starts to increase and the leaves thin out, we will start getting more of what we call those cross views. We'll be able to look through the trees and hedges and we'll be able to see well across. So we will get some earlier information, which is always quite useful. So autumn and winter does bring with it some advantages to motorcycling. Although you may think not very much. So it's already seen the two cyclists and the car coming towards us, so we might as well just hang right back and then just see what develops. We don't want to get involved in anything, do we really? Nice view across the field, quite useful. We just don't know what's around that next corner. It depends how much you want to gamble. You shouldn't really gamble at all. A little bit of horn warning, a little bit of courtesy goes a long way. As we've said before, he just wasn't looking, and I don't want to hurt anybody. It's always nice to be out on these rural roads, but you've still got to keep your attention. I love having a look around, but the focus has got to be there. We just don't know what's around that next corner. So just a few little things there to think about if you are going to ride as the seasons change, and if you have just done your CBT or only been recently riding in the summer. A few things to think about. And of course, if you are commuting, you're likely to be coming home and riding when the light levels are dropping and when it gets dark, and you may not be used to that either. We'll talk more about riding in the dark on another time, but until next time, ride safe and take care.